Tivoli Gardens is arguably one of the world's most famous theme parks. It opened in 1843, making it the third oldest operating park in the world, behind Bakken, also located in Denmark, as well as Wiener Prater in Austria. It remains one of the most visited parks in Europe, right behind Disneyland Paris, Europa Park, and Efteling. You can find it right in the heart of Copenhagen, and it's got this very classic, old-timey feel. The best way I would describe this park is what happens when a botanical garden meets a theme park. Famously, this is one of those places that Walt Disney visited when he was coming up with inspiration for the original Disneyland. He loved the atmosphere of Tivoli Gardens, so it just shows what kind of an impact this place has had. I got to visit for my first time in the summer of 2022, and overall, I had a really nice time here. There's a lot of great things about this place. The roller coaster collection might not be much. They only have 4 coasters. In fact, they only have 25 rides in total, which when you think about it isn't a ton, but the park takes up what is essentially 1 square block in Copenhagen. You're literally steps away from the city center train station. You walk out and bam, there's Rusjebanen, which if you're interested in learning about that attraction, that was by far the best ride here. I did a full separate review about it. Long story short, it's this old wooden roller coaster that is operated with a brakeman, so he controls your speed. It's packed full of airtime. It's amazing. But I'm not really going to go in depth with attractions like that, as well as Daemonen, which is their B&M floorless here. I'll eventually have a separate review of that one posted too. But I'll go through some of the other attractions that they offer, as well as recommendations, tips, and just in general what you can expect. Now, let's jump into Tivoli Gardens, or as they call it over here, just Tivoli. So as I mentioned, the park is in this really convenient location right in the center of Copenhagen. There's multiple entrances into the park, and depending on which side you're on, some are more elaborate than others. You can get into the park right by crossing the street from the main train station. There's another entrance over on the side. That one has this Lego store built into it. It's super fun. I would say that's kind of like the main entrance, probably the most visually impressive. And then there's also some on the other side. But because of that, the park doesn't have this like main street entryway. Once you enter the park, it's all just like there. But they do have a lot of really pretty centerpieces. It's like they designed this park with photo ops in mind, because there's so many vantage points where you just look at it and you're just like, wow, that's really cool. So charm is everywhere. Now, as I mentioned, they have some rides here that you can do, but if you want to do them, you're gonna have to pay a little bit extra. Tivoli is set up with an entrance fee that's 145 Danish krona, or about $20 US, and that just gets you into the park. From there, you then pay for a ride pass. That's actually more than the entry fee. That's 165 Danish krona, or about like $22 US. And from there, you can get on all of the attractions. So for our visit, of course, we got a wristband, so we could just ride things as much as we wanted. And diving into some of the rides, one of the things that immediately stood out to me is their use of space. Each ride was very carefully chosen because they don't have a ton of room to work with. They are very landlocked. You have streets on all 4 sides of the park. So the quantity of the rides is low, but it means that they really have to pick and choose what to go with. And every time they select a ride, they don't just plop it down. Each one is very elaborately decorated. I really appreciate all of the detail in some of these attractions. And I think they really designed this place with families in mind, because I would say most things here everyone is going to be able to enjoy. I mean, arguably your most thrilling attraction is Daemonen, but even though that's a B&M, it's still relatively tame compared to some of the others. I mean, this is the smallest roller coaster by B&M. It's visually very pretty, but I can't help but question this choice because I feel like they definitely could have gotten way more ride for the same price if they went with a different manufacturer. Oh, that's an odd one. Besides from that and Rusjebanen, there's also like a little kiddie coaster here, this powered coaster, kind of like a mine train. And then from there, you get into some water rides. There's an S&S shot tower. This one is fun. The attraction is called Fata Morgana. Sorry if I mispronounced that. It's a condor with 2 different seating arrangements. So you have your classic version, and then you also have this version where you can sit on the outside. It was a cool experience, but the ride was like way too long, which is actually a running theme with the attractions here. Because they don't have a ton of attractions, and because you're paying per ride, they want to make sure that you're like getting your money's worth. So for the most part, all of the rides here are actually a pretty good length. You don't really get off anything and you're like, wow, that's it. Like even their kiddie coaster just does several laps around. Their powered coaster goes around 3 times. They also have 2 dark rides. Both of these are pretty long rides. You have a shooting boat ride, and the shooting itself wasn't that good, but the theming was cool. The other one puts you in this Haunted Mansion style ride vehicle, but they put in a bunch of fairy tale dolls. So it's like Haunted Mansion meets A Small World. I thought it was creepy and weird and hard to follow, but the ride system is cool. It literally uses like coaster track to go around. It kind of reminded me of a Dream Flight at Efteling. Couple other unique attractions here. There is a haunted house. That is an upcharge even if you have a wristband, We actually tried to do it at the end of the night, but it closed earlier than we expected. Several of the attractions are like that. They'll close like 15 minutes before the park closes, but at least for the most part, that's like advertised. So we knew about it going in, but we did miss out on that one. There's also a fantastic fun house here. This play area is absolutely huge and it is so much fun. There's like a million different ways you could hurt yourself. It's hilarious. But as you can imagine, Tivoli is about more than just the attractions. I mean, heck, people will literally pay like $20 to just walk around. And I can see why. I mean, for one, there's a huge concert venue in the center of the park. So I imagine some people come here just to watch a show, but also just to walk around. This park is really pretty. Like I mentioned, it feels in a lot of ways like a botanical garden. There's pretty trees everywhere you look, lots of flowers. And when they have cool buildings, it's architecturally designed in a way to complement the natural surroundings. Like for me, this view right here is king. You see Daemonen right there, you have the Chinese tower, this bridge, the water. Like that is the spot. I'd say it's probably the most photographed area in the park, and for good reason. This lake right here is also very scenic. I love how they have this pirate ship on it. We noticed the pirate ships were kind of a running theme with the Danish theme parks. I imagine it's a Scandinavian thing. I like how they had many of these dragonfly models like hovering above it. You even see some views in the park where it's like, that doesn't even look like a theme park. You're literally walking on some of these pathways and it's like gravel. You almost have to remind yourself that, oh yeah, there's like roller coasters over here. One thing I thought was really cool is when they do have a bunch of rides, something that they've done is built up things in layers. So there's many different points where you're going up or down steps to get to something. It could be to a ride, it could be restrooms, an eatery, anything. And I think that that's really cool because again, they're like making use of the space that they have to work with. While we're talking about food, there's a ton of different restaurants in this park. So there's like a million options to choose from. We ended up eating in this food court. This can be accessed from inside or outside the park. So if you want to eat there, you just get hand stamped and then that's how they'll let you back in. There's a bunch of different food stands, so like everyone in your group can pick something different. I thought that was really cool. So Tivoli Gardens absolutely is about the experience of the park as a whole, not just the attractions. They could honestly take away some rides and I think people would still be lining up to come here. Unfortunately though, for me, as someone that is very like ride driven, for me to want to visit a park, if they have like that one ride that looks so cool, that'll be the reason that I'll go there. And as much as I did think the Rutschebanen like was the best thing there and it was like so much fun, I didn't think Tivoli Gardens had a ton of those rides that are like those must-dos that makes you want to fly out there just to do it. And I'm sure there'll be some people that'll like disagree with me there. But the bottom line was, as much as I enjoyed my experience there, I didn't leave feeling like, oh man, I'm just dying to go back here. You know, I was very content with my visit. I'm sure I'll return one day. I mean, if I ever find myself back in Copenhagen, I mean, absolutely, I'd go again. But I just feel like some of the other parks in Denmark had more of a draw. And that's why I say at the end of the day, I really do think it comes down to the attractions. Because you look at like Farup Summerland that has Phoenix, Djurs Summerland that has Piraten. I think those are much higher quality attractions, and those parks do have the quantity as well. So don't get me wrong, I mean, I'd absolutely recommend Tivoli. I think they have a lot of great things going for it. I mean, operationally, the park is so well run. They're also open for all different seasons. I've heard it's beautiful at Christmas time. I mean, one of the things you always hear about is like Tivoli at night. And that is actually something we got to experience. One thing I definitely appreciated was this park was open till 11 p.m. in the summer. That is something you rarely see with theme parks in Europe. I mean, Denmark is pretty far north up there and it gets dark pretty late. And so they kept it open late so that you could see the park with some lights up. There was a fountain show. It was cool. I wouldn't say it was all that impressive. There were some fountains, lights, lasers, and fog. It was kind of short. I definitely was expecting some fireworks. My thought of why they didn't include fireworks is I think that it's probably because there's a lot of businesses and homes like right outside of this park. I imagine that because of the noise, they don't want to do that. But it was just kind of funny because it was a really short show and it ended and everyone just kind of stood there and didn't know whether to clap or not because people didn't expect it to be over. But yeah, that was the end. So I definitely think the park would be better with like a more grander nighttime show. There's definitely a lot better ones at other parks in Europe. But it's definitely a cool park. I mean, final thoughts, you know, as much as I enjoyed my experience here, I did not think it was one of the best parks in Europe. There are definitely a lot of places that I preferred, but I'm still really glad that I got to go. I mean, just historically, what this place has and has been doing for over 100 years is really awesome. If you find yourself in Denmark, I mean, you definitely should go. With the park being open till 11, we got there, I would say maybe around like 3 or 4 o'clock, and we felt like we had plenty of time there. So as long as the lines aren't like crazy huge, I think you should have plenty of time to do everything. You don't necessarily have to dedicate an entire day to the park. If you're an enthusiast who's short on time, as long as the operating hours are long for Tivoli and Bakken, I do think you could do both in the same day. But hey, let me know down in the comments below if you've been to Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, Denmark, what you think of the place, if you agree with the points that I've brought up. If you think I missed anything, be sure to post all that below. And of course, stay tuned for more park reviews from places all across the world here at Coaster Studios, and we'll see you next time.